From the name alone, the U.S. Virgin Islands conjure up images of clear turquoise water and pristine beaches, tropical birds, sea turtles, and jungle-shrouded hills. They promise mystery, seclusion, and exploration in a little-known corner of the United States. But while the name may suggest untouched nature, the truth is, colonizers have had a heavy impact on the unique biodiversity of the islands. For hundreds of years, European settlers have destroyed native habitat to build plantations. As ships came and went carrying Virgin Islands sugar to Europe, they brought rats and other invasive species that completely changed the local ecosystem. Meanwhile, offshore fishing and climate change have brought more recent problems. These challenge both the endemic species of the island and the migratory birds and sea turtles that often find themselves ashore. In today's episode of Our Wild Lives, the Wildlife Society's associate editor, Joshua Rapp-Learn, takes us to St. Croix to find out what wildlife managers are doing to protect this delicate ecosystem.
Walking back through this path, I just crossed two St. Croix ground lizards speeding in front of me. This is 9-year-old Josh's dream, walking around surveying an endangered species of lizard on a beautiful Caribbean island.
The U.S. Virgin Islands have a really unique history. It was one of the first places visited by European explorers in the Americas. Christopher Columbus stopped here briefly on his second voyage across the Atlantic. In centuries that followed, the area changed hands a number of times between countries like Denmark, Spain, France, and even the Knights of Malta.
We'll see if I can find my way back or if I'm lost on an island that's probably about 6 city blocks in total size. I've just got back to where I left my bag, and there's several ground lizards here that have taken over the area. Sorry guys, I'll take my water and be on my way. You can have the camp back. Just don't steal my sandals.
The U.S. finally bought St. Thomas, St. John, and St. Croix from Denmark in 1917 for $25 million. They became the U.S. Virgin Islands. While the administration of the islands may have changed, colonial exploitation remained constant from the time of the first European settlers. Settlers used slavery to keep their sugar mills operational. When slavery was outlawed in 1848 by the Danish governor, plantations on the Virgin Islands imported and exploited laborers from South Asia. They also imported the small Indian mongoose as a form of pest control in the 1880s. Here's what Nicole Angeli, the director of the U.S. Virgin Islands Division of Fish and Wildlife, has to say about it.
And there was a lot of cross-pollination for sugar plantation and tea plantation owners between the Indian subcontinent and the Caribbean, and so that's why in the 1880s, for example, plantation owners in what's now Myanmar were saying, like, we have mongoose who are killing rats in our sugarcane fields, do you want some? They brought them to Jamaica. Jamaican planters said to St. Croix planters, like, do you want these? We had a parade in Frederiksted to introduce mongoose, small Indian mongoose, Herpestes auropunctatus, from Myanmar to the island of St. Croix. Now we have one of the most dense populations of mongoose in the entire Caribbean.
Naturally, nothing went according to plan. Rats are active at night while mongoose are daytime hunters. Instead of eating rats, the mongoose began to eat small native creatures like the St. Croix ground lizard. They weren't the only invasive imports. Cats, dogs, goats, chickens, and rats also continued to destroy native habitat and eat native species. Meanwhile, plantations were still operating on the island. By the 1950s, Angeli says that 97% of the forest on St. Croix was gone. Reptiles like the greater and lesser St. Croix ground skinks haven't been seen in years. The St. Croix ground lizard was last seen on the main island in 1969. Recently, I was on the small islet of Green Key surveying St. Croix ground lizards to better understand the work conservationists do.
You see, sir?
He was moving. There he goes.
Oh, yes.
But I didn't do this alone, of course. I had survey partners like Yaira Ortiz, a third-generation Crucian and an undergraduate student finishing her degree at the University of Miami. Ortiz is one of several volunteers who came to the island to help track how lizard numbers are doing on Green Key.
It is an endemic lizard only found in St. Croix. And it was once found on the main island, but now, because there have been so many mongoose and rats that, they eat the lizard. And so that has caused competition and actually pretty much made them extinct in the main island. So now they're only found here in Green Key and Buck Island. I believe there's also a population in Ruse Keys, which are all offshore keys and islands.
Because there's no mongoose on those islands, right?
Yeah, so because of the effort of University Island, the USVI and the Fish and Wildlife, they have been able to pretty much eradicate the mongoose and rat population.
Oh, there's one.
It just moved. It's behind the stick there.
The lizard was listed under the Endangered Species Act in 1977. The government created the United States' first wildlife refuge to conserve a lizard at Green Key. That's one of two small offshore islets where the ground lizards persisted because mongoose never made it there.
So that one looks like it could be a juvenile. The juveniles have a bright blue tail and they are smaller than bulb. So this one looks like he alert. He kind of saw before he was walking, so would actually note their behavior as they see them. Okay, I think that's some adult. Its tail is not as blue. The juveniles are really bright, like neon blue. And right now he's foraging and pretty much reading, and also digging at the same time. So we note their behavior.
Hard-working wildlife managers also eliminated rats from Green Key. The trouble is, nature interfered.
A powerful Category 4 storm Maria is hitting with 155-mile-an-hour winds, torrential rain, the strongest storm this island has faced in nearly a century.
Hurricanes Maria and Irma tore through the islands. The storms destroyed homes for humans and habitat for wildlife. They also blew rats right back onto Green Key. The rodents likely sailed over on floating debris. In the years since, wildlife managers like Jennifer Valiulis kicked the rats off Green Key once more.
That is a rat trap. Yeah. They have to make sure any rat trapping is set up in a way that the ground lizards aren't going to be able to access it. So it's got to be off the ground and in a box.
Thanks to all this hard work, Green Key and a few other keys might be lizard paradise. But Angeli hopes to bring lizards back to the mainland one day with the help of the St. Croix Environmental Association. Before chasing lizards on Green Key, I visited the Southgate Coastal Reserve with them. There, I saw some of their efforts to tackle the mainland threats to native wildlife on St. Croix.
I'm the executive director of the St. Croix Environmental Association here in St. Croix. And we are a small nonprofit that focuses on education, conservation, and advocacy here on St. Croix. Today we are at one of our major conservation projects, which is called the Southgate Coastal Reserve. So it's a 100-acre nature reserve that we've had for about 25 years. And it was originally protected because of a huge salt pond that we're going to visit in a little bit. That is a hotspot for bird diversity. It's an important bird area designated by BirdLife International. It is maybe arguably one of the most important spots on St. Croix for bird diversity. It was gifted to us by an anonymous donor that was a birder and wanted it to be protected because there was threat of development. And as we explored the property and learned more about it, there's about almost a kilometer-long beach front, and it's a sea turtle nesting beach. We've got 3 species of sea turtles that nest there. And mangrove areas, wetland areas. But we also have all this area where we're standing right now that is highly disturbed, invasive species dominant upland area. So at one time this would have been a dry forest long ago, but St. Croix was almost entirely cleared for agriculture. And because of that, we have this grassy area. This is guinea grass and this shrubby dry stuff called tantan. You can see there's tons and tons of seed pods on that, and those seeds just persist in the soil for so long.
Small Indian mongoose may prey directly on native birds and lizards, but invasive plants change the whole ecosystem of the island. Here's Nicole Angeli again.
Call these our colonial legacy species, the tantan, the mangoes, which are good, not invasive. The guinea grass is invasive. The dodder, you'll see lots of dodder vine everywhere as you go around the island. That was introduced as well as cattle fodder.
Where taller dry forests once covered parts of St. Croix, you now see blankets of guinea grass. This has changed the microclimate on the ground, making it less suitable for ground lizards. At one point, more than 90% of the native ecosystem on St. Croix was cleared for plantations. Many of these plantations were eventually abandoned, but the introduced species like tantan and guinea grass gobbled up the land too fast. Native plants couldn't compete. The St. Croix Environmental Association is now working to restore this area, partly through grants and partly through volunteer work. Whatever way they can, really. Fighting guinea grass and tantan directly is like fighting the tide. Instead, Valiulis and her colleagues try to restore native plants in growing patches. Piece by piece, the native habitat starts to regrow, and conditions become more suitable for birds and reptiles again.
Most of us don't have the luxury of focusing in on just birds or just lizards. We have to kind of do a little bit of everything. And so even if we're coming together under the umbrella of Birds Caribbean, we're talking about plant restoration, we're talking about lizards, we're talking about bats.
And all these things affect us too, for the most part.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's not a reach to say that they're connected.
Many of the ecological problems on St. Croix are part of a colonial hangover, but modern issues also contribute to ongoing challenges for conservation. Domestic cats and their feral cousins have caused problems for centuries. They prey directly on small native wildlife, but many Crucians are still resistant against any efforts to control feral felines.
In 2015, we had a meeting of mostly ornithologists and veterinarians about the free roaming cat problem that we have here. We mapped 19 cat feeding colonies across the island, and most of them are adjacent to or at wetlands. And if you think about it logically, why are cats flocking to wetlands? Because there are a ton of birds.
Southgate Pond and nearby Altona Lagoon are stock full of birds. Species like brown pelicans, black-necked stilts, and frigate birds can be seen in and above the water. But just 500 feet from the lagoon sits a feral cat colony. A few ramshackle cat houses have been built from plywood and old warehouse pallets. Some rough-looking cats watched me from their makeshift home under mangrove trees. I can see a freshly opened can of tuna sitting on what passes for the patio to one of the cat houses. These cats likely prey on surrounding wildlife, but humans may be at risk too, since feral cats carry disease like toxoplasmosis.
So we took sand samples with Auburn School of Veterinary and Science PhD students. They participated in a trap, neuter, release program for these feral cats, and they were able to genotype toxoplasmosis from individual cats to the sand here, where we have elders in our community bathing right now in front of us. So we are looking at a shoreline that's mostly denuded of vegetation, but has some seaside maho and sea grapes, stuff like that. There's like a boat come in front of us. There are two women over here on our right, just sunbathing. There are picnic tables. It is absolutely beautiful, peaceful, signs that say keep the ocean clean, Heart St. Croix. And then there's a feral cat colony that we know has contaminated the sand. And if you follow that evidence, it would make me think that I wouldn't want to swim here.
Sometimes it seems like conserving the island's unique ecosystem is a tall order. Feral cats are a difficult problem to fight. Getting rid of the island's invasive mongoose isn't as controversial, but it's also nearly impossible because they are so well established. Meanwhile, new problems continue to plague the island. A population of red boas that was released into the wild has taken off in the island's northwestern jungles, and climate change may be causing an increase in destructive hurricanes like Maria and Irma. Wildlife managers like Jennifer Valiulis and Nicole Angeli are doing what they can to protect land and fight back invasive species in manageable patches. Valiulis is proud of the work Crucians are doing to protect sea turtle nests and restore native plants. They follow the work that began a generation before them by a Crucian conservationist.
My name is Olasee Davis. I'm a professor at UVI, University of the Virgin Islands, in the School of Agriculture, working there for about 40 years. And my passion is protecting areas throughout the Virgin Islands, which I've been doing for years. End up going to court cases. One of the biggest ones was the Great Pond, where I testified in the court. It became international because they want to build some racket thing out there. I was involved helping establishing the Marine Park, Eastern Marine Park, with Governor Turnbull. So I was one of the advisors and the board. So there's land throughout the Virgin Islands that now is protected.
Olasee Davis has helped to protect several of the land conservation areas on St. Croix over the past few decades, and he continues to work with Angeli and others to protect more. A big chunk of the eastern end of the island has now been set aside for protection. Davis is also helping to train the next generation of Crucians, getting teenagers and college students interested in wildlife conservation. This will help ensure his legacy of conservation persists on St. Croix and the Virgin Islands in general.
I want to see more local people involved in environmental studies because a lot of people are brought overseas here, and it's just a different type of passion when you were born and raised here. You see how things have changed, especially through hurricanes, and how just being from here is a different type of passion for the work.
TWS members can read the full story, Isolated and Imperiled, our cover feature in the 2025 November-December issue of the Wildlife Professional magazine, or access a digital copy online at wildlife.org/publications. Not a member of the Wildlife Society? Join today and access award-winning journalism by the TWS editorial staff in our bi-monthly member magazine and news center at wildlife.org. Have ideas for a future episode? Send them to comms@wildlife.org. That's COMMS@wildlife.org. We'd also love it if you'd leave a review, share this episode with a friend, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. We'll catch you next week with more stories from the wild.